Okay, so now into the main meat of the lesson I wanted to do. I want to just say again as background that all levels of learners need to begin learning how to evaluate arguments. And there can be very difficult readings on this, there can be easier readings in this, but we have adult students and they can all do this. So it's not because it is a depth of knowledge 3 to really evaluate the argument, but if you're not making them write it down in complete sentence and beautiful essays and paragraphs, adults have opinions about these issues, but more importantly, they can read arguments and they can notice if an argument is not supported by evidence or it makes a faulty assumption, as long as you level the reading to the right level. Some of them can only explain it orally. Some of them can write a whole essay. Some can start writing a paragraph with help, which I'm going to have some handouts on later. Also, the end of this lesson, you'll see, relies on the fact that students have been studying the founding documents in social studies and have some knowledge of the history of voting rights in the United States. So these are all topics that can be introduced over the term before we get to this. So my first handout here. So what I came up with first was a way you can do evaluating arguments with beginning readers. And what this is an example at the top of a chart that you could either put, draw up on the board, or if you have a smart board, you can put it up there, or even on 2 large Post-it sheets or poster boards you hang up in the room. And you can label one, convicted felon should have the right to vote, and the other, convicted felon should lose their voting rights. And then the arguments I have there, I would put on index cards, 1 argument per card. Hand them out to the students. So they are not having an article to read. They don't have a whole letter to the editor to read. They have 1 argument on their card that I've taken from the readings you'll see later, but I put them in fairly clear language. You have to, in all of these readings I'm giving you today, you really have to make a judgment for your own students and know who's in your class and kind of adjust them to be good for your class. So the DOK level 1 on this would be reading what's on their cards and being able to state it in their own words. So just reading and paraphrasing. And that may take a longer or shorter time depending on your students. You also might want to pair 2 students with 1 argument. There are all different ways you can do this. Share at a table with a small group. And then I would have the students come up to the T-chart and put their argument that they have in their hand on the correct. Is it for or is it against? And that is a DOK level, anyone? Categorizing whether it's on one side or the other side? Yeah, it's a level 2. Yeah, I could have you. I could ask the students so they're not scared to speak out. They could just show me, like 1 or 2. And then I would ask them, of course, why? I'm always asking them why, because they could guess 1, 2, or 3, right? I mean, some of the times they're going to be right, but constantly asking them why and justifying their response. Okay, and then to go to a DOK level 3, starting to evaluate some of these arguments. Which arguments are most persuasive? Why are they persuasive? Which arguments are not persuasive? Why not? Why are some arguments not necessarily true? What's behind that argument? And another important question, what would be better? What would be a better argument if it were backed up by some evidence? Okay. And these are things I would really push them on some of these, like, you'll notice one of them is we don't let children or mentally incompetent people vote either. They will react to that. They'll be like, well, convicted felons aren't mentally incompetent. And just drawing that out from them. Why? Why doesn't that argument make sense? What is the author assuming? Okay? Any question or comment so far?
You do
Yeah.
this, do you also help students distinguish between fact and fiction and opinion and belief?
I mean, a good point is, yeah, so there's only so much we can do like right here, but you can see
Yeah.
how this can be used for fact and opinion. I mean, there's so many different things. You can, when I move into the next reading I was going to mention, first they have to understand the reading, right? DOK 1. So you're going to get into words in context. They're not going to know all the vocabulary words. You can get into fact and opinions and arguments. So you can use the same exercise to get at many of the social studies skills and concepts that are on the test.
And would you incorporate where you're writing this, the particulars on the grammar aspect as well, Jordan, or is that prior?
I would not do grammar with this lesson.
Okay.
I think it's way too much. Yeah, no, I think, yeah, I mean, it's good to consider. What I love is when our writing teachers know what I'm doing in reading and social studies, and when they do sentence combining and grammar editing and all this, like I will then, I had the advantage, I'll admit, at Academy of Hope this time, I was teaching the same level of students reading, social studies, and writing. So when they had to edit a paragraph that was pre-written for them, it was about voting rights. And then their homework was to write something about that. But while I'm trying to teach them arguments, I wouldn't either correct their grammar or talk about it. Yeah, so great question. Thank you for asking.